Terry Lynch from Power Metallic. Yesterday, we were talking about how AI is literally changing the landscape for our industry. Where do you want to start?
You know what? I mean, I think it's interesting, right? It impacts in so many ways, right? Everything from how we use it in exploration, how we use it in investor relations, how it's impacting stock markets right now. There's a lot of places you could go with this, but I think the point we've been trying to make on X and other interviews and whatnot is that people should see the mining industry as a very I think asymmetric way to play the AI stack, and I think that that's something that's been missing probably from the traditional media. And they get all the hype on SpaceX and Anthropic and the data scalers and the AI centers, the data processors, all that stuff. And that's all fine and good, but those are winners and losers that are mammothly valued. And it's like every other day, a new AI, a Claude version X comes out and it beats DeepSeek version Y and beats Grok, Super Grok Z, and then the next day it switches back, and it's like, wow, it's pretty mind numbing to try and keep up with all that. So it's not a game I really understand, and I'm not going to get into it now. But all those guys, DataSeek or DeepSeek and Anthropic and Google and Facebook, they all need massive amounts of power. That's the number one thing they need. Okay. And how do you get massive amounts of power in this world? Well, you deliver it on copper. Okay. It all starts with that. And you probably need a lot of nickel and a lot of platinum and palladium, like all these metals that, have been overlooked for years and years and years. They need them now worse than ever, and that's the penny that hasn't dropped, I think, for general investors. And that's one that they should drop on.
Well, personally, I think as AI becomes more and more progresses, as it progresses, investors, it's going to help the overall capital markets because a more efficient way for market valuations is going to occur. That's one of the advantages I see from AI myself. So, have you seen any of that yourself in your day to day with your shareholders?
Not so much, from the shareholders, but I mean, I've certainly, I go to AI and if I'm looking at an investment, I'll say, here's the data that I think is core to the investment thesis and say, what do you think? And then you get some really great insights back, so I think from a, just a general practical way to sort of, approach valuation, bottom up type stuff, it's pretty sensational and how quickly it gets it done. Like the hours and days of work that analysts used to pour into companies to come up with a number. AI does it in 80 seconds. It's ridiculous. Now sometimes that's ghosted and you have to sort of make sure that I find you need to query it a few times to make sure they've got the right stuff in there. But yeah, it's a massive tool for getting a quick insightful look on any company.
Well, I'm certain AI is delighted by your most recent new Lion drill intercept results. Do you want to talk about this? Because I received several congratulations to Power Metallic in my WhatsApp account, for instance.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you run Power Metallic through AI, it's going to give you two thumbs up. Let's just call it a spade a spade. I mean, the results have been fantastic. It's interesting and instructive to see how really poorly our stock has done, relatively speaking, relative to the results we've delivered. But Mr. Market's always right, at the moment, and so we have to sort of say, hey, what can we do better? And I think what we reflected on, the reason why we moved our MRE up from Q1 of next year to end of July this year was our feeling was that, yeah, while there's obviously a specific set of investors, the guys that have been investing and writing big checks for us, the smartest mining guys in the world, pretty much, the Friedlands, McEwens, Sprotts, Reinhardts, all these great mining investors that have backed us have been there for us. But something's not fit with the general public, or the stock could be much, much higher. So our assessment internally was that this ore body is so unusual. It's such a high grade ore body that the general market just can't process it in an effective way, that they don't somehow believe it. They think there's something missing there that they don't quite get. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they're uneasy. And an uneasy investor doesn't invest, and we get that and we respect that. So that's why we moved the MRE up, was to basically say, hey, you know what? An MRE basically is going to be done by an independent, engineering firm that's going to basically put a line in the sand and say, hey, this deposit, according to our best of our engineering, protocols and 43101, stratagems, there's this many tons in the ground at this much grade. Okay. And then you can take that and put that into your AI with, your recovery rates, which we've always published, the payables, which we've published, the taxes, which we published, and then you're going to be able to get a really good number. Okay. And we think that number is going to be $1 billion north, something in that range, NPV. And we're trading for less than 200 million. Our peers, if you look at the copper development peers that are in our group, probably range from a probably 0.45 price to net asset value to over 1. The guys that are getting higher are basically people that have a clearer pathway to production, generally higher internal rates of returns. And I would say when people compare, when we actually publish this in a couple of weeks, we will be at the very top end of that spectrum, in my view, in terms of internal rates of returns and pathways to production. So we did this to basically provide as much as we can irrefutable proof to the general investor that this is going to become a mine, a very robust mine, and that right now it's spectacularly priced. And now all the evidence is there. So no longer the mystery of there's something hidden we don't know. No, we've actually verified that for you now. There's no reason why you don't just step up and make some money. So that's why it's been done, and that's sort of our assessment of where we're at.
You brought up several excellent points in your last answer, including Eric Sprott. I could have sworn I read that you had 14 billionaires already in the stock as shareholders. Is Eric Sprott number 15 or is he number 16?
Yeah, he's probably number 16 or 17 at this stage. Yeah, we've had been very successful. You know how tough it's been in the Canadian market. I mean, it's obviously easier now, although obviously the last couple of months has been tough. It's been it's been a challenge to raise money over the last number of years in mining because it wasn't hot. People were not moving there, so we had to go and find our way into people that actually understood mining and that had the capacity to invest. And so we targeted through various means, a number of the ultra high net worth mining investors, and one by one over time, we've been able to convert pretty much all of them to invest significant sums in Power Metallic. And it's been kudos to the team to be able to deliver the project that justifies that type of enthusiasm from sophisticated investors.
Well, of course, at Investor News, we have a lot of investors that come to our site. And perhaps one of the questions they have is the timeline. There's just so many fast ways. People are looking for fast ways to flip a buck. Do you think that maybe they just don't understand how fast you are achieving milestones? How about we hit some of those? What should shareholders, for instance, expect in the upcoming 6 months? And why should they be so incredibly excited about Power Metallic beyond what their AI systems are going to tell them about your valuation when they check it after this video interview?
Yeah, I think the obviously the catalysts that we see for investors are the what we think should be a re-rate after the after the MRE, the mineral resource estimate, is released end of July. That should lead to a re-rate. Whether it leads to a re-rate in day one or over the course of the fall, I'm never quite sure. It seems like whenever we put out news, it doesn't matter how spectacular it is. Day one, it rarely goes up in the number we would expect. But then over the course of a few days, it does tend to rise quite nicely. So, as I said, hard to predict. I'm not Nostradamus exactly when that will happen, but I believe in the fullness of time, the mineral resource estimate will lead to a major re-rate. And the reason why I have that thesis is that I think that investors ultimately do the math and they'll compare us to our peer group and they're going to realize, hey, these guys are way cheaper than their peers, and they have way better attributes. And hence, if I own those guys, I should own this guy, or maybe I should move from one guy to this guy. That I think ultimately that happens over time. Second catalyst that I think will really add value to the story is a move down to Nasdaq. We've been we changed some rules at our annual meeting to enable us to be able to be eligible to list on NASDAQ. We're well along the process now. I'd expect by the end of Q3 would be listed there. And I think that'll lead to also a chance for a major re-rate because more U.S. investors would be likely to invest. We won't have to do a consolidation. It'll be done through a thing called an ADS, and that would mean we will basically trade as a a 5-pack of Power Metallic shares or a 4-pack or whatever. So it would just trade under NASDAQ under that auspice, and I think that will open up. Generally speaking, in stocks, the key threshold I think is 300 million US. We're about a little less than 200 right now. I think their MRE should push us above that number. And once you get above that number, that's when they start to get true institutional interest, and then a lot of times people will move from 300 million to a billion pretty quickly, and that's sort of what we envision could happen and should happen based upon what we've done, but we think that moving to NASDAQ will be a big part of that, so that's a catalyst to watch for, and then the third thing to always be watching for in an exploration company is more exploration results, right? We believe this is a very big ultimate mineralized area. And once we have the 43-101 out, I can speak about ore, but I can't speak about that today. But when we get that done, I think there's that these orthomagmatic ore bodies, which is what we discovered, are generally very big. The smallest, I think, is about 1.25 million metal-contained tons. The average is probably north of 3 million tons, and the big ones are north of 10. Endless range estimates, but certainly, we probably are half the size of the smallest one, or something in that range at the moment, and it's highly likely that we're going to find a lot more. So that's likely to happen. We believe this is a district scale area, and we've got enough land and targets to go after that. We believe will generate a lot more exploration enthusiasm. So I think that's the third plank in the thing, and then there'll be other interesting pluses that will happen over the fullness of time. Is Chilean metals. There's going to be some exciting stuff happening there later in the early fall, and then our Saudi operations are going very nicely. We'll expect to start drilling on those in Q4, and expect some really interesting news there. So lots of catalysts, I would say, to go up, and we've already raised the money, so we're not diluting. So there's no real impetus for the stock to go down beyond general market conditions and fear of the Iranian war and this sort of thing.
Well, you've certainly been a leader in communications. So, for anybody out there interested in following Power Metallic, follow their social media, follow their website. Terry, you provide so many updates on a regular basis for investors, but I want to go back to the AI again. I don't think any investor really began to understand how fast AI was going to take over or increase exponentially the way that it has. And the impact on data centers, for instance, and power has been staggering. So why don't we get you to host a masterclass for the Critical Minerals Institute for investors in AI and technology, and how they can expand their opportunity in the AI industry by investing in, for instance, Power Metallic. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We're certainly trying to, on X, reach out to the AI investment universe, which is massive, of course, because generally those guys are not investing in mining. Well, we know that mining used to have like 11% of the S&P, and now it's less than 1%. So we know that general investor is not a mining investor. So it behooves us all as miners to try and expand the tent. If we're going to make a move as a mining sector to get back from 1% to 2% to 5%, we need to get new investors. So how do we reach them? Well, we got to reach them where they're at. They're at the AI space, and that one of the best ways, the most, I believe, asymmetric ways to play AI is to buy really great mineral deposits, because they are going to be a major beneficiary of the AI revolution.
And of course, let's not forget the military metals demand, which has increased exponentially as well the last year and a half. So you have the billionaires, so you have the industry. Everybody knows who Power Metallic is in the resource sector. Can you tell us a little bit more about your travels right now? For instance, Saudi Arabia. This is a very exciting project. Can you give us a little bit of an update on how you're doing in Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, yeah, we like Saudi a lot for two big reasons. One, we think the geology is really, really amazing down there, and there's going to be major discoveries. If it's anything like the rest of the Arabian Shield, there's already been massive discoveries there, some in Saudi as well. One just down the road from our first project in Saudi is Jebel Said is a $5 billion project between Maaden and Barrick, so and amazingly discovered with 96,000 meters of drilling, which is that's crazy, man. If you told us 596,000 meters, that'd be more believable. But the reason why that is, which is the second reason why we love Saudi, is it's very cheap to explore there. Two reasons. One, mineralization is mostly at surface. So that Jebel Said, which is a VMS gold copper, is between surface and 200 meters. Okay, in like you take Nisk as an example, the average hole at Nisk might be 400 meters. So we're looking for 20 meters of really great stuff, and 400 meters. So that means you have 300 meters of waste. They have the same 20 meters in Saudi, and it's on the average of 100 meters. So they only have 80 meters of waste. So think of that 80 meters of wasted drilling versus 380. Big savings, okay? Number one. Second, drilling costs are half the price of Quebec. And Quebec is already very cost competitive globally. So one of the cheapest places to explore in the world is Saudi Arabia. And it's got great bones. So it's like, most of the really sharp guys in mining, Friedland, McEwen, you name it, they're all pouring into Saudi because for the very same reasons that we are, that, hey, this is probably going to become a really hot area. So we've been doing a bunch of the spade work. There's nothing, unfortunately, Tracy, there's there's no fast food for mining. You have to do the spade work. You do the geophysics, the geochemical, that you have to do all these steps before you can actually, do proper exploration. So we'll probably be ready Q4, we think, for Jebel Bowden, which is our 100% owned project. We've been working with we've developed a new partnership down there on some new exploration targets that we're working on with a really great family office in there called the Amar Group, very well known, very influential Saudi partner. And we're going to be, I think, adding a couple of projects there that we'll announce shortly. That'll be very interesting. So lots of exciting stuff to come in Saudi. And we think, I say to people, look, 4 years ago, Nisk was a seedling. Today it's a mighty oak, and we believe it will be a forest. I see Saudi very much in the same light. It's a seedling, but it's got great bones, and we expect it to grow very rapidly and really be a serious contributor to our value proposition.
And Terry, of course, Power Metallic is in excellent condition cash-wise. You just raised 28 million. Would you like to add anything? Like, what are we looking at for your cash and capital demands here over the next, say, 6 months?
Yeah, I think we're in good shape. Obviously, not needing to go back to the market at all. We've got a pathway through to next spring. I think one of the things that we'll work on over the next little bit is probably, and we've already had multiple conversations with strategic investors. People would like to get a serious stake in Power Metallic. We didn't want to entertain that until after the MRE, and obviously between now and the PEA, that's probably something we'll entertain. In terms of as a way to further de-risk, the opportunity for investors. Foran did an amazing job of following this pathway, forward to developing and ultimately, doing the merger with, Eldorado for 3.6 billion. So it's a good pathway, I think, for juniors to go, and eventually, at some point, it's important for the market to see that, hey, some massive organization with massive credibility is prepared to write $100 million check, and something like that. That's what again makes people more comfortable. So those are the steps that one would expect that could well come from Power Metallic over the next 6 to 12 months.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is that your valuation is definitely not where it should be. You haven't achieved effective market valuation in comparison with your peers. And also, I think what I'm hearing is that, for those of you out there in the AI sector that are looking to get into a big growth sector, companies that are moving towards production that are supplying these AI critical minerals are definitely something you should be looking at. Would you say that's correct?
1,000%. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
For those of you interested in finding out more, Power Metallic has one of the best investor relations teams of any of the publicly listed companies in the mining industry. We recommend you go to the following website and subscribe. Thank you so much, Terry, for joining us today.
Thanks, Tracy. Cheers for now.